All right, now we move on to the next discussion, which we are actually entitling as Sink or Swim. Now, this is a topic that is very sensitive and actually very particular to our country. It has been discussed not just, of course, at COP27 by virtually every single nonprofit organization in our country, but even this morning, how the Philippines itself is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change in the world. Now, when we look at all these scientific studies, we always say we need to believe the numbers. But whether we are number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, that doesn't change the fact that we are losing lives, loved ones, family members, people's lives and livelihoods that cannot be replaced. And when we talk about climate change, it is not complete, of course, once again, until we highlight the topic of typhoons, which we are experiencing at a rate of at least 20 typhoons per year. And of course, we are praying that in the next few months, this is not something that we will be facing again, heartbreakingly. And this year alone, we've already experienced a number of storms, and we already just had one pass Paeng. At hindi lang yun, sana po hindi na din ito magtuloy-tuloy pa within the year, but that's why we also have our adaptation, and that prepares us for the steps moving forward so that we won't just survive, but we can thrive. We have also seen a lot of adverse weather events in many parts of the world with recent heat waves in Europe, the UK, South America, and devastating floods in Pakistan, Venezuela, and Australia filling our news feeds. It is not just here that it is happening, and it is not 10 years from now, it is today. And of course, we attribute these events to climate change, and we are bound to see more of them in the future. So for businesses, what can we say is the best adaptation practices for them? How can they build resiliency and that of their stakeholders? Let's find that out as we welcome our new set of panelists on this fireside chat, Adaptation, Sink, or Swim. First on our panel, let's give a warm round of applause. She is the Program Director for SM Environment and Sustainability and Global Board Member of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. This is the focal point of the United Nations System for Disaster Risk Reduction, supporting countries and societies in its implementation, monitoring, and review of progress. Please welcome Ms. Liza Celerio. Next, we welcome the first Vice President and Chief Reputation and Sustainability Officer of the Aboitiz Group, where she oversees the group's brands, creatives, corporate communications, and sustainability programs. She leads the company's sustainability agenda and redefines the One Aboitiz Sustainability Framework, unifying the group's strategic business units in addressing ESG issues. Please welcome Ms. Jingay Ontiveros Malvar. Also joining us is a materials engineer who has developed an innovative solution to the affordable housing shortage facing modern communities. He is the designer of the patent-pending Kubo modular system, the first engineered bamboo building platform in the world, which was recognized as the global winner in the Cities for Our Future Challenge by the UK's Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors in 2018. Please welcome Kubo co-founder and CEO, Mr. Earl Forlales. Our next panelist is the head of the Quality, Sustainability, and Resiliency Division of Maynilad Water Services Incorporated. He oversees quality management systems, quality assurance, water and wastewater regulatory compliance, environmental management programs, occupational safety and health, sustainability, business continuity management, and resiliency. Please welcome Attorney Roel Espiritu. Thank you very much once again. And before we begin this fireside chat, we may take our seats. We encourage our members of the audience to take part in asking the questions for our wonderful guests that have joined us today. You may once again go to mentimeter.com by clicking or visiting this QR code that you see here on your screen. And we look forward to sharing your questions with our speakers. Now, let's get started on the fireside proper. Now, let's get the ball rolling with this first question. We would like to get, of course, each of our panelists' reaction straight away on the Philippine scenario of vulnerability to climate change. As we mentioned, we are not only rarely responsible for emissions globally, 0.03, but we are also number one when it comes to its impacts. And so for each of you, how do you feel you are taking action towards this, and what would you like to see more? In no particular order, whoever would like to begin.
I think I'd like to jump on that question.
Sure. Go ahead, Earl.
Before the caffeine dies out. I'm Earl Ferlales. I'm co-founder and CEO of Kubo. So I think to illustrate my point, I would like to paint a picture. So imagine you're building your first home. There are two ways that you could do it. First, you could go the traditional route. So use concrete. Look for contractors, carpenters, builders, masons. And then in the process, during the construction of your home, emit tons of carbon dioxide because you're using cement primarily to build your home. The other thing that you could do is you could choose to build your home out of a sustainable building material, which is bamboo. Bamboo, in the process of growing, harvests 600 kilograms of carbon dioxide for every ton of material that you use. So basically what you get is a carbon negative housing solution. And that's what we're trying to do. The way we're trying to prepare our environment in terms of construction is we're combining basically a highly renewable material and taking the construction out of the weather and into a controlled environment in manufacturing. When we're not controlled by the environment, by the weather, even if it rains outside, it doesn't matter. We can still build homes. So that's how we're preparing ourselves in terms of the construction context, for my part.
Okay, I think, with climate change, we expect the following. Warmer temperatures, the frequency, intensity, and the longer duration of droughts, which will pose health risks. And the changing ecosystems that because of our geographical ranges, the effects on plants and animals, especially on biodiversity, and the extreme weather events. So in SM, we focus on the extreme weather events because we are greatly affected by typhoons and the flooding, and also volcanic eruptions, and at times is more on some effects on the tidal waves. So because of our locations, so I think we approach this on a two-pronged method, like adaptation and mitigation. We have to adapt to extreme weather events that's being caused by the climate change. So we integrate plans and programs to adjust to the climate scenarios, and we also have to manage our environmental in terms of electricity, in terms of water conservation and solid waste. So there are a lot of things that is happening, and it's actually happening now, and that has been announced. It's very loud and clear. Warning shots have been made in the COP27, and you can see that the private sector has been asked a lot on how to adapt. So we have started the adaptation and mitigation in terms of our designs in our facilities, green solutions, green technologies, and that has been long way before we speak about sustainability. Environment has been in our DNA. And it was Mr. Hansi who already looked for these solutions. We had the building management systems. We were able to put the water recycling in our facilities, and all these that have been doing a great effects in the environment.
Thank you very much, Ms. Liza. Ms. Jingay?
Yeah, hi Tony. Good afternoon. It's really nice to see everyone face to face after a long while. So I thought I might just add to the conversations, but more from like a regional perspective. Actually, we just wanted to share that we just came back from the APEC and the APEC Business Advisory Council summits and meetings, which were a flurry of activities that lasted for a whole week. And of course, all things sustainability and especially on the climate questions and issues were a major part of the discussions, right? And our Aboitiz Group CEO, Sabine, was also recently appointed to be the 2023 Vice Chair on the Sustainability Working Group. So we expect more of these discussions to happen. And hopefully we can share many of the learnings there from a regional perspective and share it here to our local stakeholders. And at ABAC, so that's the APEC Business Advisory Council, we also feel that for us to be, I think, better prepared to overcome, the challenges in terms of climate adaptation, we also have to put forth, I think, our own brand of climate leadership, something that's unique and relevant, not only to us as businesses or organizations, but I think more importantly to the country as a whole. And when we talk about climate leadership principles, like for example in APEC, these are actually based on three things. So mitigation, which was already tackled a lot by the previous panel, what to do, in terms of making sure that we are able to measure so that we can manage, right? And then at the same time set science-based targets and really pour investments and resources into those transition pathways. And then adaptation is, of course, a very, very major part as well of the climate question or the climate issue. And it's really all about helping communities better understand what the impacts are from climate change, capacitating them in terms of their knowledge, and then also different programs or initiatives that they can execute on the ground. And the experiences of countries in APEC in terms of vulnerabilities to climate are not the same, right? So we have our own unique situation as well in the Philippines. So it's really also about building our own pathway for adaptation. And then, of course, the question also on just transition is very much a part of the climate leadership principles that I think, especially for developing economies like the Philippines, I think it's very important for us to have a stronger voice, especially in the regional platforms on things like this. This is where our opinions, and I've heard many of you talking about it in private conversations and also in sustainability forums like this one that Colleen has put together so well, about climate justice from the Philippine perspective. So I think we owe it as well to our stakeholders and communities to have a much stronger voice on regional platforms. And then in terms of the Philippine perspective also, the issues on climate and the questions on climate, or how do we adapt better, how do we make ourselves more prepared or resilient for the future, have also made its way into a lot of the government discussions that are happening now with the new administration. So, for example, in meetings that we've had in the Private Sector Advisory Council, where Aboitiz Group, we are working with more than 30 CEOs. Many of you in the room, your CEOs are actually part of that council. So climate has also made its way into discussions on the sectors like infrastructure and agriculture, because as we know, these are also sectors that are highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, right? So we have to continue to find the unique path that works best for the Philippines, that works best for our individual organizations, and I think more importantly for the communities that are really so affected, right? And these are the communities, our own stakeholders who are also part of our value chains, who are part of the areas where we have our business operations. So we have several resources also that are available at APEC, and I'd be happy to give it to Colleen maybe as the organizer for the sustainability forum so that you can also share those information. It might be useful as well and I know all the companies here are rethinking, right? We're all rethinking a more meaningful and relevant path for all our sustainability gatekeeping, and the programs and initiatives that we do. So that might also be useful. But yes, adaptation is a major, major part of the climate question. And I think for the Philippines, I think it's the biggest question really, because we are very much the victim of 100 million years of a very small fraction of the world essentially doing all these polluting activities, right? And then we're bearing the brunt. We're bearing the brunt, we're bearing the cost, right? So we need to, I think, have a stronger voice.
Couldn't agree more, Ms. Chingay. Attorney Roel.
Maraming salamat at maginahawang araw sa inyong lahat. I think this is my second time to be invited here by SM. I think way back 27 or 2018 when we're discussing resiliency. So 24 by 7, 7 PSI. That is our service responsibility. We have to provide you water 24 by 7 on your top, and the pressure of the water should reach your second floor. So that's our obligation. And what are we doing? No? So that whether we have water or we don't have water, you have water in your top. So that's the question. So there are 4 things that we are doing in Maynilad to ensure we are able to provide you and live up to our service obligation. One is we are aggressively defending the watershed. So the watershed that's really, particularly Ipo and Angat, have really bear the brunt of deforestation. So we are into aggressive reforestation and protecting the watershed. One is to ensure the water quality, raw water quality. And the second one is, of course, it really adds to our carbon sink, carbon sequestration. The second one is we are retrofitting, we are improving our processes so that we can cope with the changes in the raw water. Just to give you an example, La Mesa 1, La Mesa 2, our major plants, are designed to only handle 200 NTU of turbidity. That's the original design of the plant that was turned over to us by the regulators, by our MWSS. Now, because of the changing weather patterns and extreme torrential rains, especially during Habagat, no? Our experience since 2010 until 2019, the turbidity reaches as high as 2,000 NTU. So we retrofitted our plants, no, because of this. So the retrofitting will be finished by early next year. So hopefully that will really address the turbidity. But then Ulysses came around. I think this year or like last year. The NTU was as high as 4,000 NTU. So it's always been while we try to get ahead of the curve, it's always a challenge with the effect of the climate change. Third one is we are really adding to our portfolio of water resources. Now, we are the first one to tap water from Laguna Lake way back in 2010. We added another plant there in 2019. And we are going to put online another plant by late 2023. We are trying to also limit our dependence on the Angat Ipa watershed. And of course, the demand for water is really growing fast. The fourth one is that we are now tapping into a climate-independent water source. Just last month, no, October 26, after we have gotten the permit from the DOH and the LGU, we have been producing, and supplying 10 MLD, 10 million liters per day of water coming from treated effluent of our Parañaque sewage treatment plant. No? So we are, instead of just returning the treated effluent already compliant with DNR regulation, we are treating portion of that and make it potable. So the water is compliant with the Philippine National Standard for Drinking Water. And this is really I think moving forward will really be a game changer for the country, because this water source is, this raw water source is really climate independent. It will not affected by typhoons, not affected by drought and the like. So those are the things that we are doing in Maynilad so that we will be able to provide you 24/7, 7 PSI.
Thank you very much, po, Attorney Roel. And I feel like today's topics really have brought us towards some key words that we've mentioned. So as we mentioned, mitigation and adaptation, we also talk about communities a lot and the impact that each of the industries is making on communities, but not just the impact as well, also looking at how we really cannot move forward in a powerful and sustainable way if we do not work with local communities, if we do not collaborate and integrate these programs and actions. Because even when we look at the numbers, in the past 50 years, the Philippines alone is responsible or accounts for 75% of deaths across the South Pacific region. And this is something that is really heartbreaking, scary, and not just that, it's something that does not need to happen. So as we look at the incredible actions forward by each of these industries, for instance, how SM has always included disaster risk reduction in the integration of their buildings to also provide a place of rescue and, of course, a refuge in these situations, we would like to hear more about the challenges that you still face that you believe are also actionable but that need acceleration forward. And, of course, how these are related to the extreme weather patterns that we are facing. And once again, moving forward into that term of sink or swim, survive or thrive, which means we want to thrive. And for that pathway to be realistic, what do you see can be done about these challenges as well?
Yeah. Okay. So for us at the Aboitiz Group, I think one of the first things that we did was 2 years ago, we were actually the first Philippine supporter for the TCFD. So that's the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And although it sounds like a highly technical subject, it's actually a very practical approach to how you can understand better your climate risks. Have a better assessment of these, and then forward-looking how to manage these risks better. Because the risks which you face because of climate change, weather disturbances and all these extreme events, actually impact the communities, right? So it impacts our employees, our stakeholders, people who are, people and organizations who are in our supply chains, and many other stakeholder groups that we serve. So, for example, one of the meaningful things that came out of undergoing, this TCFD journey of ours and really doing all these climate analysis scenarios was we're able to better understand these risks, and then from a financial standpoint and also an operational standpoint, what do we do about it? So, for example, we operate hydropower plants, and for us to better understand, the physical risks and transition risks that such a facility could be subject to. So we are then better able to understand, like from a physical risk point of view, we might be affected, let's say, by either drought or maybe fluvial flooding. So what do we do about it? And that's very important because that impacts, the electricity that we're able to generate for our communities. And when you think about, our numbers as Aboitiz Group, that we do serve like 20% of the total Philippine power requirement. So it's a huge number for us. So we're really, really very careful to look at these risks to assess and then manage them better. Then another thing also is every time there's like an extreme event, a disruption that happens, like for example, Typhoon Odette, right, which happened in Cebu, which also happens to be our hometown as the Aboitiz Group. Doing the climate analysis scenarios and also as part of our TCFD journey has helped us also to better understand, forward-looking risks and try to see how we can work faster and work better and in a more synchronized and synergistic manner to be able to help communities cope better whenever such events happen. We cannot prevent these things from happening, but we can certainly prepare ourselves better and then also our communities of stakeholders for such events. So among many other things, of course, that we're doing. But our TCFD journey has certainly been instrumental in helping us in a more pragmatic way instead of just being, this very esoteric, very intellectual or technical process.
Making everything holistic and, of course, connecting on the ground. Thank you very much.
The impacts of climate change is varied, it's interrelated in different sectors and different industries, and we have faced different consequences, harsher working conditions. We have also increased our risk, our hazards, our exposures, and vulnerability to the different risks caused by climate change. The changing regulations of the government also has been one thing that we look at in the private sector when we have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to also follow how they put up regulations for all of this. So overall, the SM's strategy is to put up a roadmap. We have already the complete roadmap for our energy conservation, and some of our other aspects, like in water management, we have already also prepared our businesses for that. And if I may add to the water management, SM has also been doing the water recycling and has been doing zero discharge. And this has been part of our even CSRs helping other areas, because we're now to donate water for public consumption, for public use on landscaping. So while we face different consequences, we have to look at opportunities also in terms of this effects. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And of course, looking at it holistically across the board, how lives and quality of life can also be improved. Thank you very much.
I'm coming from a sustainable construction context, right? So for us at Kubo Modular, there are two sides to the challenges that we face. First, on the production side. So since we're trying to basically substitute concrete, which is solely responsible for about 8% of the world's carbon emissions. So what we're doing instead is creating a regenerative solution. So bamboo, in the process of building, actually harvests carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And it so happens that it is also a very good building material. And we've known that for centuries. Our ancestors built the Bahay Kubo to be able to survive in the middle of a very hot field at the middle of the day. And it's also a very good natural heat insulator, which leads me to the second part of the challenge, which is the increasing temperatures of our environment. So for a homeowner, one issue that you would, of course, consider is, how can I survive in this home without an air conditioner? So it's a very practical problem that every homeowner would face. And we've found and we've demonstrated through our projects in Kubo that if you build a home, even if in the middle of a field, in the middle of a farm, that inside it can be up to 14 degrees Celsius cooler than the exterior wall. So that's already a massive change in how much energy you would require to maintain a home. And that's just a byproduct of just using bamboo. We didn't even have to do anything with the design. We simply had to use this material in engineered bamboo. So I guess if you're trying to figure out the context of where I'm coming from, you could look at one of our products at kubo.ph. It's cubo.ph. So just to give you a bit more context of what I'm talking about. So yeah, that's for us at Kubo Modular. We're trying to advocate for restorative construction, building more houses while restoring the environment.
For Maynilad, we have done our homework in terms of risk and opportunity assessment. So we have put in place our business continuity management plan, and it's a certified BCMS, ISO. BCMS certified business continuity plan, so that we'll be able to provide the water to our customers even during disaster, in event of disasters. And I think most of our facilities that we're putting up right now have resilient design embedded in them. And I think we took a page from SM's Marikina SM City. Most of our plants, particularly here along the coastal Manila Bay, are elevated now, so that we will be ahead of the curve in terms of the rising sea level. So that is what we are doing in Maynilad. Also, we are putting up more and more large water reservoir, so that we can take advantage of rain harvesting in the future.
Thank you very much, Attorney Roel. And as we listen to these discussions and conversations, we really see that reducing greenhouse gas emissions, the path to net zero, is not just one thing or another. And it's definitely not just about energy consumption or shifting to renewable energy. It's about sustainable agriculture. It's about making sure that we are also looking at the circular economy, regenerative ways forward, all the way to regenerative agriculture as well. And so looking at all of these, we see truly today that everyone here, especially the guests that have shared their insights, they're really on an aligned pathway forward in partnership to make things better, leading the way forward for the Philippines and for the rest of the region. Now, how do we say that we can train? Actually, this is a question from Mentimeter, from one of our audience members, and they would like to know, how do we train the MSMEs to be more proactive and have a BCP when the Filipino culture is predominantly that of ayuda culture? And anyone may begin with responding to this as well.
In SM, we have a program for our SMEs. So we were able to invite them to enroll in our Resilience Center. We provide 5 gigabytes of data storage for them, for all of them, wherein they can store their critical documents so that in terms of disasters or in terms of eventualities, they can always retrieve that, and that's free for them. And we give them the BCP training sessions every time with a certificate together with the DTI. So we have partnered with DTI for the BCP for our SMEs. What is challenging is that even if you give this free to the SMEs, they lack the time. So what we do is to look for incentives to how to entice them to be part of the of this program. So it's part of their assessment if they have a BCP. So that is good for renewal of our contracts also. So this is one way of inviting them because, you know, SMEs, they will always ask if this is free or this is a paid one. So what we do is, number one is say it's free of charge. We only need your 4 hours time. You also have to condense it because they don't have much time. And then number 3 is really, this is a sponsorship of DTI. So if you put that in place, all these elements, then you can attract them to be part of the BCP program. So it's really very important on how you will invite SMEs so that they can be part of the company's business continuity plans.
That is incredible. Of course, integrating strategies from experience is really incredible. Thank you, Ms. Liza.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think also because, you know, MSMEs are really concerned about survivability, especially micro entrepreneurs, right? So I think they kind of eat BCPs actually for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so to speak, in the sense that they're all about how am I going to, you know, get to the next day? How am I going to survive for the next week? Is my business going to make it or not? I mean, these are the very real questions that face our micro entrepreneurs, you know, farmer associations, barangay-based community organizations, right? So I think when we do, I mean, even us, when we do our own programs for MSME resilience and better adaptation for the future, etc., you kind of also have to promote or sell it to them in that it really is about them being able to overcome challenges and survivability and then move on to the next phase of growth and hopefully, you know, scaling up their business and prosperity. But I think the approach has to be like that because it's something that they can relate to. And then to your earlier point that they always ask whether it's free, of course, because they really don't have the financial resources even to train, you know, to undergo trainings. You know, they don't have the normal opportunities, I think, that we in conglomerates or companies usually take for granted. They have a very different reality, I think, from what we know of. So we kind of have to adjust also the approach that we do for them and then also the content as well. So it really has to be laymanized, and for example, we're doing that very well now in our Aboitiz Foundation program, which is Biyaheng de Giscarte, which is really helping MSMEs tool up, scale up, providing them with digital tools for the future. And then we also incorporate or inculcate into that some, concept loading about sustainability and climate change and all of that, and why, and because, why this affects them directly and their businesses and survivability and everything. I just wanted to throw that in because their concept of reality and their way of thinking is really, really different. So we really have to tailor fit it and approach it, I think, from their perspective so that their take-up of those concepts actually means something to them. And then they can, a light bulb goes off in their head and they say, okay, kaya pala, sige, kuha ko na. So dapat talaga ganito. Meron din akong BCP. Right? So it's the term, right? What BCP means to them, but actually every single day for them is all about business continuity. Yeah.
And of course, remembering the inclusivity in everything we do, I think that's really where the just energy transition comes in again. Because in reality, when we look at how things are intersectional, we don't really put people and the planet separate. And it's not just the simple fact that whatever happens to the environment impacts human beings. It's also a matter of human rights and social justice. And many times, you are correct, a lot of people out there don't even realize how it impacts their own personal journey every single day. And so for the leaders, in sustainability moving forward, they have the opportunity to learn from the best of the best and be influenced on a pathway forward that can also be integrated to your bigger systems across the planet, across the Philippines as well. We have another question from the audience, and this is for Kubo Modular. The question is, what tools or software do you use to measure carbon sequestration?
Yeah, thank you for that. So for our part in Kubo, we base our research and our measurements on established literature. So we fortunately, because of the competition we joined in 2018 based in the United Kingdom, where we actually got a cash prize to start the business. Along with that came mentorship, and along with that, access to literature on the use and the growing of engineered bamboo. So these are life cycle assessments from planting all the way to the actual use of engineered bamboo into real products. So it ranges from handicrafts all the way to construction. So these are already established literature that we're basing our numbers from. What we're actually very excited about at this phase of building Kubo is there's a lot of opportunity to build plantations all around the Philippines, which will also contribute a lot to the carbon sequestration locally. And I think a lot of our conglomerates here can already know about this because a lot of our conglomerates are planting bamboo to help restore our mining sites, our watersheds, all of these things that people just don't realize yet that there's also a big business opportunity at the other side of the value chain, where we have these finished products, where we can build houses using bamboo, and there's a lot of carbon, basically, to be harvested locally, given our 0.3%. Although that's small globally, that's still big locally, but if we're looking to reduce our emissions by 70%, as stated earlier this morning, then we have to go and invest in nature, as our DNR secretary said. And what that entails actually planting things that we can use not just for the sake of sequestrating carbon, but also to boost the local economy, because there's a lot of business, there's a lot of money to be earned in the other side of the growing of bamboo.
Thank you very much for your insights on that, Earl. And we look forward, of course, to more updates and an exciting pathway forward for you and your company. And congratulations again. We want to turn back the conversation really quickly again to disaster resiliency. Now, globally at COP27, the really assertive phrase that we would really hear, we are asking everyone to decarbonize across the planet. But of course, when it comes to the Philippines and for other developing countries, not just that, for countries that are actually vulnerable to the risks of climate change, the conversation on loss and damages was really huge and was also championed by a lot of climate advocates from our country, from provinces such as Leyte, Samar, and so much more. Now, with this situation, how do you think developing nations, not just us, but countries like ours, can cope with these impacts that climate change is bringing upon us, not just, of course, in 2050, but today? Because as we look at the climate relief operations or emergency operations that happen, we really do not want to just keep going on that path as well. And we really want to see more solutions that actually are more mitigative and, of course, adaptive, and at the same time also look at it beforehand, not just delivering after. For each of your industries, how do you approach this pathway forward?
I guess my practical answer to this question really would be we need a lot of financing, right, in order to address this. I think that's the reality. I mean, coming from COP26, coming from COP27, I think bottom line, it's really about the financing that should have been due to, especially for developing economies like ourselves, that should have been due a long time ago, but which other countries have not been able to sort of keep up with in terms of their commitment. So I think as a country, we have to push harder on this, because this also impacts directly, our ability as well to do our own transitions, right? A lot of it is actually conditional on the financing that's supposed to come in. I mean, just looking at all of you here in the room and hearing about all the private sector initiatives, I believe that private sector is really doing its share. It's really trying to do its part, right? But we're going to need some help. We cannot go at it, alone. And decarbonization is such a it's such a huge undertaking, and we're going to need financing for that. So closing the gap on the $15 billion, mark is, I think, going to be absolutely essential if we are ever going to actually get to our targets in terms of the decarbonization contributions of the Philippines. So I think it's really about that, the financing gap. That has to close, and very soon. And probably also the other question that we can think about is, are there any other game-changing technologies or innovations out there that haven't really been explored? I mean, I've been hearing about really radical stuff like solar geoengineering, right? Just to warm up, to cool up the planet for like a year or two. But that's really radical. But there might be something out there, right? And maybe our younger people in the room, and our young scientists, and hopefully the youth that we are training or developing to be scientists can probably contribute some solutions, because we're going to need to have one really, really quick. Definitely coming out of COP27, I think everybody knows that we are on track not to meet our first global climate target, which was the 1.5. That's the reality.
Yes, basically I agree with Jingay. We really need help in terms of financing. In Maynilad, I was mentioning a while ago that we are doing resiliency stuff in terms of process improvement. But these things cost a lot of money. The retrofitting of La Mesa 1 and 2 cost us about 7 billion. And we were forced to do that because of climate change, and we are not the main culprit for it. Maybe we can rally in front of the embassy of the and demand damage and losses. No? Because at the end of the day, our customers are paying for it, for this retrofitting and process improvement. For now, we are really banking on harnessing technology and to cope with climate change. And again, these things entails a lot of money, a lot of financing. So if we can get really good terms in terms of financing from financing body, international financing body, that will be really helpful in terms of us coping with the impact of the climate change.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ms. Jingay and attorney here. Imagine Maynilad, Awites, SM, and they're talking about financing. We're Kubo, we're an MSME. So we're a very small company who's trying to do good for the environment. So I'd like to reiterate that I'd like to zoom out for a bit, no? Because it's not just for sustainable construction, but for any sustainable product in general. The problem is scale. So if we don't put money on a solution that works on a small scale, we don't have any hope of achieving economies of scale, where actually the costs decrease and it becomes affordable for the mass market. So it works for water, it works for energy, it works for development by SM, and it works for a sustainable home for bamboo. So investment really is key. So whether that comes from the private sector or the government is another question. But if people would invest in sustainability, then I guess there's really hope for the future.
Thank you very much, Erlen.
Yeah,
Final?
so we're talking of today and not 2050. So I think the private sector should scale up their investments, the innovations that are coming in. They have to also work with the government, collaboration. The government can put their LGU buffers, I think, in the economies which the government is now doing, plus more on the capacity, institutional capacity, to be able to educate and create the awareness that this is happening today and not in 2050. So there are a lot of other capacity and capabilities that we can do. The private and the public sectors can cooperate.
Thank you very much, Ms. Liza. And just to round off all the opinions given, it really shows that public-private partnerships as well. So it can't just be the businesses in the private sector. We also need, of course, support not just from international funders, but from our own local governments as well. Really finding ways to give these pathways forward to the leaders that are actually experts in the field and that already exist in our country as well, already doing the great work. We actually have one final question before we close our fireside chat. We are running out of time. We would like to ask, what do you think is the best advice that you can give right now to MSMEs, given that you are all already on wonderful pathways forward, for them to be able to climate-proof their business, to be able to be prepared for what is happening not 10 years from now or in 2050, but what is already happening today? In no particular order. Anybody may respond.
Yeah, I guess what I would tell micro entrepreneurs, MSMEs, is really try to learn as much as you can, right? So, take advantage of all the opportunities for webinars, trainings, get into the development programs that are being done by the different companies or conglomerates of which you are probably part of their supply chain. So take advantage of all those, opportunities. And then I also just wanted to say, because our topic today, Tony, was sink or swim, right?
Yes.
So
Sink or swim.
yeah, gosh, by all means, the hell, we have to swim, right? And not only
Yes.
swim, but it's like a triathlon. We have to run,
Paddle
we have
for
to
your
jump,
life.
we have to, and so I think all of us know the urgency, right, of these questions, because it also, climate is not just about climate, it's not just about envy, but it's also about helping the Philippines solve our biggest problems, which is really poverty and food security, hunger, right? And that's a climate question as well. So we're definitely, there's no sink. That's not an option, right? So it's swim, run, jump, do everything, extremely possible so that we can actually get to the finish line. And then we do it together, because we all need each other. We do it together.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jingay. Thank you.
I think Ms. Garcia of WWF put it simply earlier, that if we are really looking to make progress in terms of sustainability, we have to make drastic changes. So for our case, in this context of sustainable construction, our suggestion is to turn to engineered bamboo, which we believe is really the material of the future. For other sectors, of course, there are a lot of radical solutions out there as well. But it won't work just, one company cannot do it all, right? So we can do some things to mitigate our carbon emissions, to help harvest carbon dioxide, but there are multiple players that have to act in order for the whole ecosystem to be built.
Yes, just briefly. So our advice not only to MSME but also the other companies is really to do a honest to goodness risk and opportunity assessment and realize early that you cannot swim alone. Otherwise, you will sink alone. So do it together.
Okay, so it's swimming upwards. Okay, so I think for the MSMEs, it's really their planning, their finances, just enough for their business, and then always look for the prevention. Is always plan and then their prevention so that they can avoid all of this. Plus, good programs, join capacity sessions given by the private sectors. There are lots of private sectors doing it already. We're just waiting for them to come to us. In fact, even with the help of DTI, there are even a lot of entrepreneurs programs that can help them in their financial literacy so that they can be able to, swim up. They're really, we were wondering, even in SM, when we provide so much already for the SMEs, but then it's really the education and the information awareness campaigns that are really needed these days, because once they close their business, it's so hard for them to go back. So it's how you can put up more information and awareness campaigns to help them understand that business will always be there and consumers will always buy into their business. It's more on to improve their business models, and be prepared.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
Tony, just one last note from me.
Sure.
I couldn't advise MSMEs, given we are an MSME ourselves. But I think what we're doing here, the Sustainability Forum, is a great platform for them. I think going around the room, I'm the only one here who's in that scale. So I think it would be great if the next time we have this great event, if we can have more small to medium-sized enterprises in the room, because they really need the exposure. Yeah.
I think we should be able to influence behavior and the paradigm shift of the people, especially in the MSMEs. Yeah.
One MSMEs. We should play a game today using that for a tongue-tying.
Because in SM we call it SMEs because we deal most with SMEs, but across the industries here is MSMEs. Okay.
And I think the recurring theme really here is truly beautiful. We talk about the 17 SDGs mentioned earlier. Number 17 is partnerships for the goals. But truly, it's about empowering each other so we can rise together, not swim together. But before we end this fireside chat, I would like to ask everyone in this room really quickly. Sink or swim? Can I hear that again? Sink or swim? All right, and we are doing this together. Let's give our panelists a wonderful round of applause for a wonderful session on climate adaptation. Once again, Miss Liza Celerio, Miss Jingay Ontiveros Malvar, Mr. Earl Forlales, and Attorney Roel Espiritu.